And then I felt something vibrating on my body. Really strong vibrations, more and more, like back, back, back. And then the anesthesiologist was in front of my face and said, "She's back." I was aware of that again. I had a cardiac arrest. And my response when I saw him was, "I'm not staying here." For me, it was like, I would have loved to stay there. They didn't let me, but I also don't want to be where I am now.
Miss Schlüter, you had a near-death experience a few years ago that changed your life significantly. If I'm correctly informed, this happened in the hospital during a long period of suffering after you had been diagnosed with Crohn's disease. To begin with, I'd like to ask you to describe the circumstances that led to this experience and what you experienced at the time.
I worked a lot. I didn't listen to my body at all. I didn't consider myself important at all. I knew I was sick. But in the end, I pushed myself into the shadows. And I didn't want to see myself. And I can still remember the day very well when I went to the hospital with this diagnosis. Crohn's disease. You already know that, Anita. But now surgery is due. One that is quite significant.
How did this disease affect you? How intense were the effects on your daily life?
I often had intestinal cramps. Cramps that radiated into my back and into my legs. I endured so much pain that I sometimes crawled when the cramps came, instead of still being able to walk upright.
So you were affected massively, and yet you repressed it.
And yet I got through everything. That started early in the morning for us. I worked in agriculture, had 3 children, a husband, a mother-in-law on the farm, and the duties were more important than myself. In the morning, when I got up, I sometimes literally crawled out of bed. And I can say in retrospect, I also took painkillers in dosages that, even back then, were already not good for me. But I managed to start the day. And once I had managed the first bit, I thought, you can get through the next part too. And once I was at least halfway standing and had taken one step after another, then I could keep going. And in the evening, I was often really at the end of my strength.
And then the diagnosis came.
Then the diagnosis came. I could hardly tell my husband the diagnosis because we still had so much planned.
You didn't want to be a hindrance.
No, absolutely not. And I didn't want to be a burden. I absolutely did not want to be a burden, although that's exactly how I felt.
And then, in hospital, what happened there?
In the hospital, I still remember when the doctor who saw me told me that I knew how many surgeries I had already had before. I had already been in the hospital many times earlier that year with the diagnosis, with various surgeries, and now again. And I could hardly ingest any food. Also not through a tube. Food mostly just passed through my body. Then she came and said she didn't know to what extent I would make it. And I said to the doctor, I already know that I will make it.
So, after having had previous hospital stays for surgeries, another surgery was coming up.
Yes, that was already clear.
Was it a special surgery or one of many for you?
No. I knew they were going to remove a section of my intestine. I didn't know if I'd manage it without a stoma. And I didn't know whether I would survive it. Then something happened. The anesthesiologist came. And I had changed my name because I had gotten married. And he only knew me as Anita Schlüter. And then he saw me there and was a bit startled, because he had already heard from the doctor that this was going to be a surgery that might take longer, because they didn't know how it would all come together.
And now he had a personal connection to this patient.
Yes, exactly. Then he saw me lying there, and already very weak. That was a moment when I thought to myself, I'll give it my best, but I don't know how anymore, because my strength was fading.
You had a certain resistance to the illness, so to speak. You simply wanted to continue living your life as you were used to.
Yes, exactly.
Had your resistance been somewhat broken by all these surgeries up to this point?
No, not yet. That took a few more hours. At the time the anesthesiologist was there, no. Then I was still a little rebel. I showed him. Yes, I'm very weak now. But you know me. Something like that was my attitude toward him. I also told him that he shouldn't think I was anything special. I never wanted to be anything special in any way.
You didn't want to be a burden.
Exactly. Not a burden either.
What happened during the surgery?
During the surgery, I really got to experience something where I felt such lightness, such beauty, a calm, a warmth, and also the sounds all gone, such freedom. I had no duties. I was just for myself. I no longer resisted going further into this beautiful, light-filled space. It wasn't even a space. It was much, much, much larger.
How did you come to have this experience? It was actually during the surgery?
Yes, it was during the surgery.
How did you experience the anesthesia? Did you just step away for a moment? Or did this experience come immediately after your conversation with the anesthetist, once you were under anesthesia?
No, it must have been toward the end of the surgery, because I was still within the frame where I could experience an incredible lightness, such brightness. And then I felt people shaking me and heard voices calling me, voices that seemed familiar. But I didn't want to hear them.
Because you wanted to stay there.
Yes, and I wanted them to stop. But they didn't stop. And then I felt something vibrating on my body. Really strong vibrations, more and more, like back, back, back. And then the anesthesiologist was in front of my face and said, "She's back." I was aware of that again.
What happened? Cardiac arrest?
Yes, I had a cardiac arrest. And my response when I saw him was, "I'm not staying here." For me, it was like, I would have loved to stay there. They didn't let me, but I also don't want to be where I am now. And then I was in the ICU. And for me, it was very important to get out of the intensive care as quickly as possible.
Let's go back to this experience. That is, this experience you had, this experience of light, was primarily a deep sensation, this feeling of being completely at one with yourself, light. Were there other elements for you? Encounters, a special environment, music?
A smell. A kind of sweet smell.
That you could associate with something familiar?
My mother. My mother often smelled like that.
Did you also have the feeling of a presence there? That she was somehow there through that smell?
Yes. A sense of security, something soft. It was good.
Your return was, so to speak, provoked by the resuscitation measures, which you didn't want at all.
Exactly, I didn't want them.
What happened next? Were you able to talk to anyone about the experience, or were you even willing to?
No, I didn't want to, and I didn't even know what I could have said. These were such strong sensations. I couldn't express them.
It was impossible to put the experience into words. Were you at all familiar with the term near-death experience back then?
No.
You also didn't know that there were people who had similar experiences?
No. No, I didn't.
How did you deal with these experiences? Did you view life differently afterwards?
At that time, I kept testing my limits. I later had many more illnesses that were again bringing me close to the brink of death. And I would have liked to have experienced that feeling again.
Pushing yourself to the limit to experience that again.
Exactly like that. But I was also lucky again and again. People said, "Oh, you're like a little roly-poly. You always managed to escape with your life."
And then there was a moment...
Then it happened.
You changed.
Yes. That happened when I was in the ICU with a person very close to me who had just undergone very serious surgery. And since I knew from my own experience, after a serious surgery, you'll manage. After the surgery, I was allowed to visit him and was sitting closer to him than we are now, maybe about a meter apart. And suddenly, I could see on the monitor how everything shut down. And the doctor said, "Now it's time, we'll bring him back." And then they brought him back. And in that moment, I was allowed to experience something else.
So was anderes noch erleben dürfen. Ich konnte quasi
I could pass on the light I had received. I could pass it on to him. And then they tried again to bring him back. And the third time, they succeeded. And I could literally see myself standing there, how I was submerged in light. And through this light, merging with him. And I could see how he was there in the light, and I was there too. Like we were connected. And then for the first time, I could see what had happened to me from a different Perspective, yes.
So you experienced your own situation again in the reflection of the other person with the resuscitation, and you were able to share this spiritual experience.
Yes.
And this perspective changed a lot for you too.
Yes, it changed a lot for me. Because that was when I realized what power lies in it.
Did you discuss this image of your shared experience with this person afterwards? Or was it something you kept to yourself?
This is the first time I've ever mentioned it.
How did things continue for you professionally? After the doors to the spiritual world had opened a little or wide, did this have any professional consequences for what you do or what you do privately?
I then started working in hospice care.
Weil das, was ich erlebe oder erlebt habe,
because I wanted to share what I experienced with people who were very afraid. Because for me, the result was, I'm not afraid. That's how I started.
You wanted to be able to pass that on somehow.
Yes, this courage. Courage alongside sadness. That you're allowed to be deeply sad. Even if the farewell stays with you for many years and you feel it, which I already experienced as a child because my mother died when I was very young, because I was there when my sister died so young. Still, that was the first time I felt how much beauty and responsibility and also what dignity and humility I had. That was so beautiful. Working in hospice care, being with dying people, even if I don't really like group work, but being with people, I like that.
Because this proximity to death is always also close to life.
Yes, exactly. And because I find this life really valuable right up to the end.
You wrote a book about your life story and your experiences. The Star Within Me. How did that come about?
Being here on earth. When I am happy and content here with everything that brings me joy, then I can shine. Then a lot can happen. Then I can get up again. And then I'm allowed to be a star. And then I can pass that on to others who aren't doing well.
The star is what you have to bring to life within yourself.
Yes, when we keep seeing the beauty in life, it doesn't matter what we do. There's real joy in it.
Is this near-death experience still present for you?
Yes.
What does it do to you?
Humility. Warmth. I've just come back from vacation where I thought, Anita, I'm so thankful, so happy, and so full of humility that the near-death experience I had, that light within me, this gift of life, is something I don't want to forget. That it's a huge gift for all people and everything I encounter, and that it's a force I keep reminding myself of. And also, going on vacation with my husband, that is something special. And then doing a canyon hike, when 2 years ago I couldn't even get into bed by myself. That is something special.
Learning to appreciate the gift of life more. Did that help you in a special way in certain situations in the hospital?
I had a situation in the ICU. I was wide awake. and it was rush hour in the ICU. I became calmer and calmer, became quieter and quieter within me. I heard the doctors and nurses talking about me. Mrs. Schlüter, will she make it through the night? And I became more and more conscious, more and more present within myself.
Without fear.
No fear. I was completely without fear, completely clear. The next morning, the doctors and also the nurses came to me. They thanked me for being so calm and yet so clear.
You weren't a burden, in a very good sense.
No, I wasn't a burden. But I really had this gratitude in me. The next morning, they were there and thanked me. I just had this gratitude within me because I was still alive.
How is your health today?
I have my limitations, yes, but I can live with them.
In summary, you've actually had many situations in your life where you or a loved one were close to death, but this has made you appreciate the gift of life all the more.
Yes, exactly.
I thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.